Hi everyone. First I wanted to tell you what we're going to do, just very briefly. I'm going to introduce myself, and these wonderful people here we're all going to say a little bit about ourselves. I'm very proud and humbled to be here with these folks. I'm going to say a little bit about me, then we're going to pass it down the line. We're all going to say briefly who we are. Then we're going to read a statement, and then we're going to open for questions. Okay? So, my name's Graham Buss. I did a PhD in engineering. I joined Shell. I worked for Shell for 30 years. I was a principal scientist. During that time, I worked most of that time in research, and I worked in the corporate centre. And I worked with a lot of very senior people in the business. At one point, I worked with Lord Oxborough. I don't know if you know him. He used to be the chief scientist of the government, and he was also at that point the chairman of Shell. And he was pretty damn straight about it. He said quite clearly that the emissions from fossil fuels were creating climate change and destroying our planet. He made this absolutely clear. The energy companies know this unequivocally, and yet they're still continuing to pump oil. Oil is destroying us. Oil is going to destroy our climate, and that's why now I've retired from Shell, now I've left Shell, and that's why I'm here now, because I have a duty to say this. And that's why I'm so proud to be here with these people. And now I'm going to pass it on. Okay.
Hi, my name is Louie McKechnie. I'm 21 years old. I'm a mechanical engineering student. I guess I'm here because after researching the climate science, I'm not a scientist myself, but after listening to the scientists and seeing what the government's doing, I'm more terrified for my future than I am of any repercussions the state could give me. And so I've been supporting Just Stop Oil for a few months. I went out on the road a few days ago. I was on top of a tanker for 18 hours. It was snowing, it was raining. I got frostbite up there. I was in a police cell for 22 hours after. Some of my friends were up there for 34 hours. Other of my friends have been on site for 60 hours plus. And I'll go back, because I have to, because if we don't, then the government's going to send us to our deaths.
Hi, I'm Miranda Walsh. I'm also a student living in Brighton. I'm here because I feel like I lived a long part of my life unaware of what is going on. I believe that the government had our best interests and wouldn't be sending millions and millions every single day into an industry that is causing not just destruction here, but destruction to people around the world, people who are living on the front line and who are having to bear the brunt of the way that we live. And when I began to read science and began to see what was happening, I don't think any of us can now not act. I just think we live under an illusion that our government have got this in their hands, and the IPCC, the fourth part of the sixth assessment came out yesterday, and they said quite frankly that our government is lying. They are lying about how extreme this is, and I'm actually here today to ask all of you, the media, to take this as seriously as it is. There are people suffering around the world because of the consequences of oil, and there are people suffering in this country, both from physical reactions like flooding and heat waves, but also from fuel poverty. They've been suffering for years and years under austerity, and they're going to suffer, unfortunately, more as oil companies hike up their prices. Just the cost, people at food banks can't even buy potatoes, can't get potatoes to boil them because they can't afford to boil that water. That is the situation we're in, and I'm asking you to take this seriously. If we don't just stop oil, if we don't stop new oil licensing, our future is absolutely in turmoil, and these people, the most vulnerable people, the ordinary people of this country, will continue to suffer. And this is serious, and it's not about opinion or politics, it's about science and it's about reality. And I just ask that you please listen and listen to the science and do what you know in your heart as a human being is the right thing to do, and that is to stop oil and to move to renewables, and we need to do that now.
I'm Nathan McGovern, I'm 22. I promise I'm not gluing myself to any of your microphones today, but all jokes aside, I've spent the best part of the last 5 years at university studying, and a lot of that is studying ethics, what's the right thing to do, and in my mind it's pretty fucking simple.
Apologies.
We stop all new fossil fuel projects. We were told last year, if we're serious about the climate crisis, the situation we are in, we have no new fossil fuel projects. These projects are murdering people all across the planet. Earlier this year, an oil spill off the coast of Ecuador has decimated coastal communities. We go back decades and we have the Piper Alpha disaster. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. These are industries built on violence, built on murdering people, built on destroying the lives of the most vulnerable people on this planet. That's why I'm here, because the right thing to do is really, really simple. It is just stopping new fossil fuel projects. It is starting that transition. It is listening to the voices of the people whose lives are being torn apart this very second. And the lives that are going to be torn apart by the situation we're in. So I don't want to overcomplicate it. I'm not a scientist, but I know enough that tells me this is the right thing to do.
My name is Cressida Gethin. I'm 20 years old. I am a student as well. I study music. And I'm here because I don't feel I can be studying music at this time. Because the future of everyone around me is on the line. I was out on the road a couple of days ago, and it was quite a harrowing experience. It was physically exhausting, psychologically quite tormenting as well. The experience of being in a police cell and being treated like a criminal, even if it's subconscious, is hard, and I don't want to do it at all. But I will go back out, however hard it is, because there's no other option right now. And I think not doing that the consequences will be worse. It will make me feel worse as well than any suffering I go through taking part in supporting Just Stop Oil. That's me.
Hi, my name is Claudia Bena Rojas. I am 24 years old, and I'm here today supporting Just Stop Oil because I am absolutely terrified. Growing up, I was always aware of global warming as an issue, but I truly believed that global leaders had our best interest, and I believed that they would do the right thing. But in the past few years, the urgency of the situation has hit me in a way that it hadn't before. I looked around the world and I watched wildfires rage. I watched people struggling to eat because of crop failure. And I watched lakes in my country, in Chile, that used to be the size of Grand Central Park in New York, shrink into almost nothing. I watched communities displaced because they no longer have access to water. And every day I worry that within the next few years, my family will struggle to have access to basic necessities that you need to survive. I used to dream of things like many other people. I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to have a family. And now the idea of bringing someone into this world is terrifying to me. We are being told that if we continue down this path, children born in this country today will be struggling to survive, will be having to fight for food by the time they are teenagers. We are being told by the UN Secretary General that we are on a fast track to climate catastrophe, and our government doesn't care. They keep giving us lies and empty promises in the place of where we need drastic action. And the reality is that the change that we need, with the urgency that we need it, is not going to come from them. It has to come from ordinary people coming together to do the right thing, to demand better. So we are here today with Just Stop Oil to demand that the UK government stops new fossil fuels in the hope that we can have a future. And now I would just like to read you a statement. The Just Stop Oil Coalition has taken a stand against the continued expansion of UK oil and gas, resisting the government's obscene and genocidal plans that is killing children now and will condemn humanity to oblivion. The Secretary General of the United Nations, launching the latest climate report, said, "Some government and business leaders are saying one thing but doing another. They are lying. It is time to stop burning our planet." On those who are demanding action, he said, "Climate activists are sometimes depicted as dangerous radicals, but the truly dangerous radicals are the countries that are increasing the production of fossil fuels." The chief executive of the International Energy Agency said in 2021, "If governments are serious about climate change, there can be no new investment in fossil fuels from this year." This is coming from an organisation set up almost 50 years ago to manage the flow of oil and gas. Yet the UK government continues backing airport expansions, coal mine extensions and new oil fields. What is going on? That doesn't sound to me like a government who cares. If we continue down this path, it will destroy families, communities and nations. It means the loss of every pension, every school, our food security, society as a whole. It's going to impact everyone and everything you love. We will face the starvation and slaughter of billions of people, with the poor being most vulnerable of all. It is a complete and utter betrayal of our children and their future. Ukraine has given us a foretaste of what this will look like. Today, we demand that the government gets a grip, that they stop lying, and they start by ending new oil and gas. Right now, as fossil fuel prices are hiked and the cost of living is weaponized to justify more oil and gas, it is time to step up, not to stand by. It's 2022. There aren't endless 5 minutes to midnight. Now we must stand together in the solidarity that matters, the solidarity with life itself. Right now, there is a need to break the law so that we are not guilty of greater crime. We have no choice but to enter into civil resistance until the government announces an end to new oil and gas projects in the UK. And with that, I would like to open up the ground for any questions that you may have.
I'll go first, thanks. Ryan from the Press Association. I think it's Claudia and Cressida. Sorry if I've got your names incorrect. You spoke quite, you all spoke quite passionately, but you two particularly seemed quite moved by what you were talking about. You were drawing on, I think, your own experiences growing up in Chile, I think you said. Sorry if I've got that wrong. Do you think that perhaps that sort of very personal aspect of it to you would actually resonate a lot more with the public than what are effectively stunts, sort of gimmicks? Do you think that actually sort of talking about how this affects you, which it clearly very much does, is being cheapened by going and gluing yourselves to people or to the ground or doing things in sort of football stadiums, that sort of thing?
I was like, do you not think people have been trying this? You know, for decades, people have been trying different things. People in the global south have been crying out for decades, warning us of what is happening, of their suffering. People have tried, petitions, talking to their MPs. People have been crying out for help for years, and the government doesn't listen, and quite frankly, the media doesn't listen. We are doing this because we are in an emergency. We have been warned. We have 2 to 3 years to determine the future of humanity. We do not have time. We need an emergency response, and this is why we're doing this, is because we have no time. We need to act with urgency.
I'm Lewis, I'm from the Daily Mail. You said that if the consequences aren't realised soon, Ukraine is given a taste of what the results could be. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's stark. The top climate scientist in Ukraine has quite literally described this as a fossil fuel war. And it's not just Ukraine. There's been a war in Yemen for about 8 years that you and the media haven't reported on. Another fossil fuel war, a fossil fuel war that our government is funding, right? What we see is societal breakdown because we are refusing to acknowledge the fact of the situation that no oil, no gas is going to play a part in our future. And by trying to hold on to that absolute nonsense, quite frankly, is tearing the world apart. You know, it's causing wars over these supposed kind of, necessary energy sources, which, by the way, are not necessary. It's causing crop failure because it's simply too hot for farmers to grow crops where they live. We are experiencing war over resource right now, all across the global south, again, that is not being reported. That is what we mean when we talk about Ukraine being a taste of what is to come. Society is going to break down if we stand by and do nothing, if our government stands by and does nothing right now.
Can I add that the IPCC report clearly shows that, and the UN Secretary General went out of his way to say this is not fiction, this is not an exaggeration, this is the reality of what our current system is listening to. And denial and delay is not going to solve it. It's going to get worse and worse until the point that we can't control it. The only window of opportunity that we have to act is right now.
Why do you think the current system isn't listening to that then?
That's a very good one.
No, I would just say quickly that I think it's because, you see the government, you see the oil industry, it's all linked. They're giving them all this money and they're giving them tax cuts and they're giving them subsidies because it benefits them and it benefits their private lives. The Conservative Party came out yesterday, Priti Patel took a donation of 100 grand coming directly from an oil firm. It's all linked, and if I don't even know how we, have to explain that anymore. The question that I have back to you all is, why is the media not showing the severity of the situation? The government, I can see it because they're in bed with the oil industry, let's be realistic, but I don't understand why this isn't being reported on as how serious it is and people suffering isn't being reported on, and we're not saying the basic science. Oil equals temperature change, which equals climate breakdown and equals suffering. That's what you have to be putting out all the time, and you have to be demanding change because you have access to more people than we can ever reach. And I would put that question back to you, why is the media not answering that?
Do you want to answer that question first?
I haven't got an answer to that.
Well, you should have.
Yeah, you should.
You're the media, you have a public responsibility to tell the truth.
I would say that we would say that we cover the sort of major reports into this, and I think if you look across outlets, there is coverage and people are aware. So, what extent should it be covered? I mean, how can you? What would be enough?
Say with the Daily Mail, the language that you use to describe protesters, the way that you make us look.
Well, that's the protest, not the issue itself.
You're making us look absolutely out of our minds by taking this action. When actually, if you were saying how serious it is, you would say these people are putting themselves on the line because this is how serious it is.
So, is the issue with how the protests are reported rather
is
than with how the issue of climate change and oil is
serious? And I know that you have you guys have your audiences and there's things that people want, but this should be the biggest thing. People deserve to know. People deserve to know the truth.
Can I just come back to the point you were making before, which is the point about why the government's not acting. The government hasn't been acting for 40 years. It's been kicking the can down the road for 40 years. Refusing, always pushing the pushing the problem further and further into the future, saying, oh, we'll deal with it later, we'll deal with it later. When I worked in Shell, they used to say, oh, it's 2,100, nothing to worry about, we've got plenty of time to sort it out. And then it was 2070, and the Shell scenario said 2070 is okay. That's when we have to get to. And then it was 2050, now they talk about 2050. Former chief scientist now says 2040, but he doesn't say that's the right time, he just says that's possibly what we can work to. And it's getting closer and closer and closer. And now what we're told is we've got, well, Tyndale said, just last week they published a report saying we've got till 2034, I think they said, something like that, roughly 10 years or so, to get completely out of oil if you want to have any hope at all of sticking within 1.5. And I think the government are simply pushing it down the road again. God knows why. And before COP26, they were saying we need to get out of oil. They were saying it then. Now COP26 is over. It's all gone away. I think that's what's going on. The government is refusing to act because it's not convenient to act, because they don't want to make the changes that it's going to require. And perhaps we'll ask questions about the technical changes that are going to be required, perhaps later on. But that's why.
Can I ask just on what you're saying there? The government, they would claim that it's the war in Ukraine that has changed things, and that because of the war in Ukraine, the UK needs to potentially expand oil and gas production domestically, still with a view to transition to renewables. Why do you disagree with that?
Well, we buy oil and gas at market prices. The oil and gas in the North Sea, all the oil, virtually all the oil, is sold abroad. We don't use it in this country, and we don't sell it. The oil companies sell it, and they keep the profits. We give licenses essentially free, and then we subsidise that industry. So the North Sea does not make us secure. Look at the price of oil. How has that made us secure? How has that price of oil improved anybody's life in this country? That has not brought security, particularly for the poorest people in the world. Now, so oil is not part of the solution. As I said before, it's the problem. The sooner we get out of oil, the sooner we move to other sources of energy, the sooner we can move away from these ghastly countries from whom we're forced to buy oil from. I mean, look who it is. Look who the main suppliers are. Russia, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. What do we have anything to do with these countries for? The oil is not the solution, and it does not make us secure.
Do you think the government has been listening to your recent actions?
I think the government will not listen unless we make them listen. We don't want to be taking these actions, but if it gets the government to listen, we'll go back over and over and over and over and over. For 30 years, we're actually a 5-minute walk from Parliament right now. For 30 years, we've been there with our banners and our signs, and we've been screaming and shouting, and nothing has gotten done. 30 years. They've known that my generation is fucked. They've known that we're being sold out. And they've done nothing. They're not going to stop until we make them stop. We'll put our bodies on the line over and over and over again if that's what it takes. Because it's our lives on the line. It's your lives on the line. This isn't some distant future. This is now. This is your loved ones' lives on the line. If you have children and you're not doing this, then what the fuck are you doing? This is their future too.
What do you think it will take?
What do I think it will take to protect their futures? It will take us just stopping oil, and it will take us doing it now. Not when it's convenient, not when there's political will, because we have a very small window. It will take us doing it now. And if we don't just stop oil, we all fucking die. You personally as well. You're not exempt from this. All of us will fucking die. Everybody in this room.
Has the action that you've been taking since Friday, has that had the impact that you would like it to have had? And what do you think it will take for people and the government and the public as well to get on board with your message? Because what we've seen so often is people agree with why you're doing it, they just don't agree with your methods.
What we've seen is the greatest act of disruption to these businesses in decades.
Which frustrates people.
which you lot haven't been covering. You have a responsibility to tell the truth, to let people know when the IPCC says, when the United Nations says, we need to do this now, and you say, oh, there's a bunch of protesters doing this, blocking oil refineries. You don't then say, if what they're asking for doesn't get done, you as a reader fucking die. That's what's at stake here. You, as in your position, have a responsibility to the people of this country and the people of this planet, and you're criminally mismanaging that right now.
Is someone else okay to answer that question as well? You won't swear.
I'll answer.
Thank
I'll make
you.
a point. I'm with Louie. He's right to swear. This is a very serious.
That's the problem. We
That's the
can't use
issue.
it, and obviously we are here
Yeah.
and we are here today to broadcast what you have to say. So obviously, if you're going to do that, we therefore can't. So, that's our responsibility there.
Right.
Dashed.
The problem is, you don't report it. That you confuse the issues, you confuse the actions with the reason. The reason for the action is absolutely clear. All the science is there. It's a mainstream demand. The International Energy Agency has said we should do it. The UN have said we should do it. The IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have said it in the report that came out, was it yesterday? The Tyndale Centre have said we should do it. All the science says we have to get out of oil. We have to get out of gas, and we have to do it really, really fast. That's the message you should say. You might say you disagree with the protest, but you have to say you agree with the message.
Can I go back to, a point that we had before about what it will take for this to happen? And because it's something I think about all the time, because I look at everything that's going on and I'm like, God, how are we still arguing that this is necessary when so many people are suffering? And I had a conversation with my granddad when the floods in Germany were happening. And he said, maybe people will listen now because it's happening in Europe. And here we are. And I do feel that, that's what it will take, is that things will have to get to the place here where they are happening in other countries, and by then the reality that it will be too late. But I guess my hope is that we can make the realization that all these problems, all these crises that are happening right now, the climate crisis, the war in Ukraine, the war in Yemen, the cost of living crisis, they are all rooted in the same problem. They are rooted in our reliance in fossil fuels. They are rooted in how volatile it is. And it is this system that has gotten us into this situation. The answer is not continuing to rely on it. We know that we can do better. It is not a lack of solutions. It is a lack of political will that is driven by greed. So if we want to do better, if we want a future, and if we want not just a future, but a better world that is not so horribly unequal and horribly unjust, then the answer is moving away from the oil industry, moving away from fossil fuels, investing that money into renewable energy, better housing, public transport, investing in people.
Sorry, Patrick, BBC. We've had civil disobedience for several years now, first from Extinction Rebellion and then more recently in today Britain. Would you say those groups have been successful in their aims by using that tactic?
Well, in 2019, the British government was the first government on the planet to declare a climate emergency. Now, since then, all they've done is make empty promises, lies, and betray the people they're meant to represent. But the fact of the matter is, if you look all the way back through history in this country, the right for women to vote was won by civil disobedience, by people who were brave and put their bodies on the line, put their liberty at risk. History is a catalogue of ordinary people standing up for what is right and refusing to back down when corrupt criminal establishments are trying to clamp down on them. And as has already been said, we will continue to go back on the roads. The supporters of Just Stop Oil will continue to go back on the road because we know civil disobedience, civil resistance, standing up to our criminal government is the only thing that can affect change.
With that in mind, can you tell us any more about where, or when, or how you next plan to demonstrate, whether you're going to escalate, what it could involve? Are you able to give us any insight into what's going to happen next?
I mean, it's plain and clear. It's the oil infrastructure of this country, an industry that is destroying lives, not only in this country, across the world, has to end. It is that industry that we will, the supporters of Just Stop Oil, ordinary people all across the country, will continue to put their bodies on the line until that industry comes to an end, until our government stands up for the very people they are meant to represent and stops all new fossil fuel projects, all new licenses for fossil fuel projects.
Have you got something planned in London in the next few days, on the 9th perhaps, is that correct?
You'd have to ask Extinction Rebellion about that.
That's a separate, will you be involved in any way? Is there any sort of
It's a separate group.
joint? Of course, yeah, I just wondered if there's any sort of joint.
We're here to talk about Just Stop Oil today.
Fine.
Extinction Rebellion demands are very aligned. So Extinction Rebellion, part of the Just Stop Oil Coalition, demands are very aligned. And new fossil fuels.
You mentioned putting your body on the line. How far does that go? What does that mean?
The suffering which every single person in this room will face if we stand by and do nothing now is horrific. You know, I don't know if any of you have children. You're going to watch your children grow up fighting over bread in the bakery aisle of supermarkets. Us putting our bodies on the line, civil disobedience, risking arrest, risking the damage to our futures, is absolutely microscopic compared to the unimaginable horror we will be facing if we stand by and do nothing right now.
And I think, also just with the specifics of what that means in real life, it's like there's two people right now at Navigator Oil Terminal, they've dug a tunnel and they've been in there since like 3 a.m. of Friday, so this is their 5th or 6th day, and they've been down there, they've been denied food or water when people have tried to come to them to offer a battery pack or food. The police have arrested those people and then taken them, held them in a cell overnight. Those people are still in a tunnel, and that tunnel, police who are not trained have been trying to dig them out, and it's been close to collapse. And I think that's what, that might be spun as these people are, what are they doing? They're ridiculous. That is how serious it takes. And these are young people. There's been young people gluing on, doing things that, like, I'm sure when they were children they never would have dreamed that they would do. And now when you read, you see science, you see suffering, and then you see inaction. It's just absolute emergency response, and that is all we have left. So I think that's what, in physical forms, that's what it means, is that people will, and in answer to your question, people will keep going. And there's people blocking on the M42, junction 9, blocking an oil tanker right now. People at an oil terminal blocking it, and at Navigator blocking it, and I think people will keep going until our government issues a statement that they will stop.
I'd also like to talk to that about how far we are willing to go putting our bodies on the line. I'm going to talk about the same people my friend did. 2 friends of mine, Ben and Amy, quite close friends, they are the people in this tunnel. They've been down there, stuck in this tunnel, not tall enough to stand or even sit up for 4 or 5 days. They've been without food for 4 days, but because the police stole their food, they're trying to starve them out. These people have gone without eating instead of going out for 4 days in this tunnel with police overhead stamping on the ground. The police are using intimidation tactics and fear tactics to try and get them out. But they're not leaving, because we can't afford to leave right now. We can't afford to lose. Because losing is the death of all of your loved ones. If you have children, us losing here is the death of your children. I personally put my body on the line too. I locked my neck to a goalpost. I had a fan jump out of the crowd with a knife trying to get to me. Security was able to withhold him. Another man was able to jump out of the crowds to kick me. He connected. When they were cutting me out, they were pulling on the cable tie around my neck, cutting off my air supply intermittently. I couldn't breathe. I was saying, "You need a medic here, you need a medic here." One man in security uniform says, "I am a medic, you get what you deserve," as my air was being cut off in front of a crowd of thousands of people. They were chanting, screaming at me, hoping that it works, hoping that my air is cut off long enough for me to really feel it. As I was carried out, dozens and dozens of projectiles were thrown at me. Many more tried to jump the barriers to attack me. That's how far we're willing to go, and likely further. And I'll do it again if I have to. If the government doesn't just stop oil, I'll do it over and over again.
How did what your feelings about the crowd's reaction in that situation, and what's generally have you found the reaction to that been like since?
We knew what the crowd reaction was going to be like. I hated the idea of ruining these people's favourite passion, ruining their favourite pastime. But these people have a right to know. They've been lied to by their government and the people in power, and they have a right to know what is coming. They have a right to know that their lives are on the line too, so they can act accordingly. Since doing this action, I've received hundreds of death threats. I don't think I can ever return to Liverpool or Newcastle again. I have court there in a few weeks, and I expect I'm going to be in quite a lot of trouble with the locals. I'm going to go there and be responsible for my actions. And whatever repercussions I face, I'll face them with my head up high.
Can I make a follow-up to that? Gary Lineker tweeted his support for Louie after that. He said, may not support the method, but it supports the message. That's what you have to do. You have to support the message. If you want this to end, you can do your bit. The Daily Mail can say they support the aims. They may not support what we're doing, but you support the aims. It's not rocket science. It's essential. Now, you can do that, can't you? You can write that. You can say you support the aims, that we have to stop oil. We have to get out of it. We've got a window of opportunity. We have to use it. Come on, grow up. Do it. Man up to this.
Can I ask a question about compassion fatigue? And it might be best that Louie answers this one, just because of what you said a second ago. Goodison holds something like 42,000. I imagine it was reasonably full. You said there were thousands chanting, screaming at me, hoping that it works. That was cutting off the air supply. Do you think that that demonstrates that actually the public aren't with you on this?
If the public really aren't with us on stopping oil, then the public are into suicide, they're into genocide. Their lives are on the line here, and if they don't support the message, they don't have to support the means. We don't need them to support the means. We need them to support the message. Because when the scientists say, you have to do this now or you will die, they mean it. And so...
Can I just follow up on that? A lot of the public don't know. You've got to tell them. You've got to help. That's why we're out there, because we're trying to get the message across. You have to get the message across too.
Do you think the public generally would find it quite condescending to suggest that they're not aware of climate change?
I don't think they're not aware of how serious it is, because you don't tell them. The messages are always presented in very placatory, non-alarmist ways. What you don't get is the language that you get from the Secretary General of the UN, for example. You don't get the language that you get at the closing statement of the IPCC report. You don't get that kind of really, really scary, frightening language. You don't want to frighten people because it will require a change, and the government doesn't want that change because it's uncomfortable for them. You have to make these points. Come on, you've got a massive readership. You could make a difference.
Can I add? You go first.
Can I? Yeah. I'll speak to that as well, which is that on the road, when I was went out on the road, we were met by a lot of oil workers who were very angry. I think they were probably quite scared as well. They didn't quite know what was going on. They were extremely angry, and a few people in my team were pushed and shoved, and there were buckets kicked, so on. After I had been arrested, a friend went and de-escalated one of these oil workers and talked to them, explained what we were doing, and the conversation went from hostile and polemic to the oil worker understanding more what we were doing and accepting it and even supporting it. So that there is only so much of that ordinary people like us can do on the streets. the rest of it, making the connection between the actions that we are taking, the disruption that we're causing, and our demands, our message, that is your job.
Is what you've just said not just the exact reason and the clearest example of why your methods don't work? They turn people off and they frustrate people, but talking to them is maybe what actually does work. Can you understand why the methods you're taking are frustrating people? Because it disrupts the lives that they've...
I'm sorry, Charlotte, but that makes you complicit.
Yes.
You are complicit in what is happening. You are complicit in genocide. You are complicit in the death of my child. You're complicit in the death of your own family, if you believe that. We have been doing this for years. These people are putting themselves on the line and you are trying to blame them. How dare you?
No, I'm just asking, can you see why from that conversation, you know, the workers were frustrated at the methods, but they understood the message? So I'm just asking, are you considering changing your tactics for that reason?
And what else would have got them to listen to us?
You
got them
are
to talk to us?
in this room because of our methods.
That's a good point, yeah.
You're LBC, aren't you?
Yeah.
Some of the people on there are bordering on climate deniers. That's why we're out there. You've got a duty to tell them the truth, to stop that kind of bollocks about climate denial and, there's another side, there's another case to be made. Why we can't do without one. You've got a duty to tell this story. You do recognise that, don't you?
I was just asking about
No, I'm asking
methods.
you, do you recognise that you have a duty here, that we have a serious problem, that we are facing a catastrophic future if we don't address it? We've got a small window of opportunity, we have to address it. Do you recognise that?
Recognise that climate change is extremely real, yes.
And do you recognise the need to address it? Do you recognise that we need to get out of oil now?
I can't speak on that.
Well, read the science then,
Okay.
for goodness
Okay,
sake.
okay.
Look, it's serious. I know it's emotional, but it's serious. It's not just some... There aren't two choices. There isn't a choice, we carry on as usual, everything's fine, or we do this very inconvenient thing, which is going to make changes to our lives with getting out of oil and gas. The one choice is Armageddon. One choice is a catastrophic breakdown of our environment, and the other one is a livable future. Come on, how hard is that? Tell the truth.
If the government don't make concessions, how will you plan to escalate your tactics in regard to civil disobedience? Because as we were saying earlier, there's been quite a lot of civil disobedience over the last years, so does it potentially kind of lose its power to shock as people got used to it?
Someone else can ask that. Shall I say something?
I've already talked about the fact that civil disobedience is the one thing history tells us works. It is the one thing that history tells us how ordinary people can make change. You know, there have been petitions, there have been people sat outside Parliament, we've tried to talk to MPs. None of that makes any difference. It's not about this shock value of civil disobedience. It is about ordinary people who understand the situation we are in. Ordinary people who look at a government that does not care about them. Look at a government, in 2020, votes to let 2 million children starve over their school holidays. A government that in the Christmas of that year partied whilst the people of this country died on hospital wards. This is a government that time and time again has shown they do not give a single solitary damn about the people they represent. It's about ordinary people understanding that, and hundreds, if not thousands, of ordinary people know that. And it's your responsibility as journalists to be reporting on this and to be holding this, quite frankly, criminal government to account for their inaction on the situation we are in. We are, as Graham has said, facing Armageddon. And if our government is refusing to act, ordinary people all over this country will, until our future is secured for us, until the lives of the children growing up right now are secured. That's what it takes. As I've said, we will put our bodies on the line time and time again, like those 2 people in that tunnel, like every single person who is sat in a road, like every single person who has put their body on the line by climbing on top of an oil tanker. We will do that time and time again because the consequences of not doing so are so much worse.
Just to check, is your aim of doing that more to try and reach out to ordinary people through the media this creates, or are you trying to address more directly the government and force their hand into changing? Because if it is so urgent, as you say, surely you don't have time to take everyone with you and try and build a consensus. Surely it's more about trying to actually make the government give concessions to your agenda.
We can do both things at once, can't we? You know, we are causing significant disruption to this disgusting industry, an industry that is murdering people right now. And at the same time, if we hadn't done that, you would not be sat in this room listening to what we have to say. If we had not done that, the message would not be getting out there. The message that ordinary people have to be aware of. A message that hasn't got through because of the way it's been reported on. We can do both things at once, can we not?
I'd like to add to that. As in, what are we going to do moving forwards? We are going to continue to grind the fossil fuel industry to a halt by whatever means are necessary. And all of you, as you now understand, have a responsibility to report on this accurately. Come along with us. Be with us on the sites. A few days ago I was on Navigator Fuel Terminal with a lot of my friends, and it was terrifying seeing them being shouted at, from time to time assaulted by these drivers. And you lot weren't there. Where were you? Will you be there next time? I'm honestly asking you this. I want an answer.
I was there on Saturday.
Nice one, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add something? Sorry, deviating slightly, but I think, you know, like you've all said, like it's no longer a case of denying that climate change is real. I think we all know that the urgency isn't being portrayed, but the reality is even the government in the really slow, disastrous way of managing have said we need to move away from fossil fuels. The longer we leave it, the worse it's going to be, not just in terms of the climate disaster, but in terms of people suffering now. And what we want is a just transition. We want the government to facilitate this, to take care of people. This isn't about leaving the workers behind. This isn't about demonizing workers who are just trying to make a living, who rely on this. You know, these are people who need to be protected and taken care of as well. And the longer the government halts this, the longer they leave it, the more urgent this transition is going to have to be, the more people that are going to be left behind. So again, if we want not just a future, but if we want a better future, we need the government to get a grip. We need a government to take care of people. We need them to stop lining the pockets of an industry who has openly said they have more money than they know what to do with, and actually start prioritising the welfare of people and their future.
I want to make just one other point, please. All right. This is an economic problem as well. I mean, Daily Mail, I'm sure they're interested in the economics of it all. This will impoverish us. This isn't just this. People's lives are going to be destroyed, but one of the consequences of that is that our economies will collapse. The cost of just firefighting all the problems that are going to arise from climate change, the flooding, the subsidence of houses, the food losses, it's just endless what's going to happen to us. Our economy will collapse, and if we don't address it soon, it's going to collapse whatever we do. I mean, the oil price at the moment could cause another economic crisis, like 2008. It could do. The oil price is so high, that's what could happen. So we need to get out of oil. Otherwise, we're going to have this happening over and over and over again. As the diseases go up, our health risks are going to go up, our economies are going to collapse, our food is going to collapse, our homes are going to collapse, they're going to be flooded, they're going to fall down. And the Environment Agency have already said they haven't got the current resources to deal with the issues we're facing because of climate change. And yet it's going to go up about tenfold. It's going to end up being about 1% of our economy just to maintain the economy, just to fix all the problems we get every year. And that's only assuming, that's not even assuming the worst case. You know, currently current promises, we're heading to 2.7 degrees. 2.7, that's the global average. That's be up 4 times more than that over the land. That's an unimaginable change to our environment. And if we renege on those promises, which we currently are, it could be much more than that. It could be 7 degrees. The changes we are looking at are catastrophic. Do you think we would do this if it wasn't serious, putting our lives at risk? I don't want to be here. I want to be at home. My feet up. I want to be retired and in the garden. I do not want to be here. I have to be here. And you should know that. You should recognise that. You should recognise the courage of these people. My friends. These are some of the best people I've ever met. Please remember that. We are genuine in our aims. We are genuine about the future of ordinary people, and we are genuine about wanting to live in a better society, a safer society. The society we could move to, if we address this now, could be a much better one than the one we have now. Much better. It doesn't have to be worse. It isn't about going back to the dark ages. It's a better society we want to move to. And moving out of oil will be a better world.